boys and girls. Welcome to the Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program. The Ministry of Education and Partners COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program is a 30-minute radio intervention support program that is meant to provide continuous instruction to keep you academically engaged during this stay-at-home period, as well as preparing you, our 6th, 9th, and 12th graders for the pending Liberia Primary School Certificate Exam, Liberia Junior High School Certificate Exam, and West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Exam when the time comes. Also, in addition to this academic support, the program is meant to provide psychosocial support for learners, teachers, and parents, and also tips on how you as parents and teachers can provide support to your students and children at home. Now, let's join our teacher for today's lesson.
The Ministry of Education's COVID-19 Teaching by Radio program, Grade 11 Literature, continuation of the summary of the African novel, Second Class Citizen. Hello class, my name is Linda Y. Dean and I am your teacher for today's lesson for Grade 11. We will continue with the summary of the African novel, Second Class Citizen. Remember, we stopped at where Ada sent her husband Francis to England to study, and she stays in Nigeria to continue working to send him money. In continuation of the lesson, we will continue with Ada. Ada does not give up after she sends her husband to England to study while she stayed in Nigeria to continue working to send him money. She keeps her hopes up, and when her husband writes to her a few months later that he is going to be in England for at least 4 or 5 more years, she decides it is time to make her move. And she goes and convinces her in-laws that it is necessary for her to be in England with her husband and that Francis wants her there, which he did say to her in his letter. She soon books herself and her 2 children first-class tickets on a ship to England. The real struggle begins for Ada as she arrives in England and is welcomed by cold, rainy, and cloudy skies. This foreshadows all that is to come for her later on in the story. That is, the coldness that she met, the coldness, severe cold that met her when she landed in England is a foreshadow of all the troubles that she will experience later on in the story. She is shocked by the grayness. That is, the sun is not shining, the place is cloudy, and so it shocked her, but she will not give up on her dream. Ada has arrived in the United Kingdom, and this is where she goes from a first-class citizen in her native Nigeria to a second-class citizen in England. Some of the main points of struggle for Ada are being a black woman in a predominantly white society. That is, she's a black woman in England where you have more white people than black people. Another one, that is, another point of struggle for Ada is learning of the women's rights movement during the 70s. Because where she's from, there is no women's rights movement there. And then she gets to England, and this is what she learns, that there is a women's rights movement going on there in the 70s. And also the fact that there is birth control available to her, and her struggle to pursue her goal in becoming a writer, and ultimately, between 4 children and a lazy, abusive husband, the time to write. That is, she had to struggle to pursue or to run after her goal to become a writer, and to also struggle to take care of 4 children, to live with a lazy husband that was abusive, and on top of that, to find the time to write because she wants to be a writer. This book, class, deals with many different issues and movements, and how they all interconnect and relate to one another and also one woman. Just as the reader starts to find hope for Ada, another circumstance arises. And as the book progresses, one wonders how women or one woman can put up with so much and yet be so strong, not only for herself, but also for her children. She never gives up on them or on her dreams, not even when her first piece of work is burned by her husband. The first writing she comes up with, her husband burned it. So class, there it is. That is the plot summary of the novel. Now we will talk about the setting. The setting, remember, is the time and place the story takes place. So the first 2 chapters of Second Class Citizen are set in Nigeria in the 1960s. In Nigeria, patriarchal means a system that is controlled and run by men. Women had no education because it is a privilege. That is, it is a privilege for women to be educated or to even go to school. So Ada had to struggle to have an education. Women are property of men. But in England, women had to face the same racial discrimination that they had there in Selvan, but this time a gender discrimination. The setting of the story presents a typical situation of colonized women. That is, they are colonial subjects, but they are also a female subject. The gender discrimination is particularly underlined by Nigerian husbands. They replicate the patriarchal traditions, so women are twice colonized, as migrants first and as women. That is, they have a double condition of subordination and colonization. So Ada character, the main character in the story, she never depicts the women as strong women fighting to get freedom they should have. The instrument that is used in the novel is education. Education plays a fundamental role in this struggle of emancipation. Ada wants to be a first-class citizen through education. That is, education means having an active role in a society. The bride is something to be bought because women are objects and children makers. Maternity is fundamental, that means very important to determine a value of a woman. Fertility is very important, but they are considered only for their reproductive capacity. That is, only women. If the woman can have a child, then it makes her value to go up. So the men or the depiction of men is always negative. That is, how the writer shows the men to be is always in a negative way. Ada's husband is depicted as lazy and violent. This is how the writer describes Ibusa and how the villagers see United Kingdom. Whenever Ada was told that Ibusa was her town, she felt it difficult to understand. Her parents, she was told, came from Ibusa, and so did many of her aunts and uncles. Ibusa, she was told, was a beautiful town. She had been taught at an early age that the people of Ibusa were friendly, that the food there was fresh, the spring water was pure, and that the air was clean. The virtues of Ibusa were praised so much that Ada came to regard her being born in a God-forsaken place like Lagos as a misfortune. That is, Ibusa was praised as being so good that Ada felt that being born in Lagos was a misfortune. Her parents said that Lagos was a bad place. bad for bringing up children because here, that is in Lagos, they picked up the Yoruba Mbati accent. It was bad because it was a town with laws, a town where law rules supreme. That is Lagos. Lagos had laws and the laws ruled Lagos. Boys and girls, let's now take a quick COVID-19 health break and we'll be right back.
Coronavirus is spread via droplets. When the person coughs or sneezes, the droplets land on surfaces and are picked up on the hands of others and spread further. People catch the virus when they touch their infected hands to their mouth, nose, or eyes. It follows that the single most important thing you can do to protect yourself is keep your hands clean by washing them frequently with soap and water or hand sanitizer.
Welcome back, boys and girls. In Ibusa, they say you take the law into your own hands. So Lagos was bad because Lagos had laws and people had to live by the laws so that they don't take the law into their own hands. Whereas in Ibusa, they took the law into their own hands, as they said. In Ibusa, if a woman abused your child, you went straight into her hut, dragged her out, beat her up, or you got beaten up, as the case might be. So if you didn't want to be dragged out and beaten up, you wouldn't abuse another woman's child. Lagos was bad because this type of behavior was not allowed. You had to learn to control your temper, which Ada was taught was against the law of nature. So that is the setting, class, for the story Second Class Citizen. We are now going to talk a little bit on 7 actions in the novel and their significance. We will first begin with the actions, starting with Ada's childhood. Ada has a dream of something that is not yet specific, that originated from nowhere. Ada did not know for sure what gave birth to her dream, when it all started. But the earliest anchor, that is the base she could pin down in this drift of nothingness, was when she was about 8 years old. That is, she could remember thinking about this thing that she didn't know where it was going to end when she was about 8 years old. She was not even quite sure that she was exactly 8 because, you see, she was a girl. She was a girl who had arrived. As people normally say when a child is born, oh, it's a girl. So she was a girl who had arrived. She was a girl who had arrived when everyone was expecting and predicting a boy. So, since she was a disappointment to her parents, to her immediate family, to her tribe, nobody thought of recording her birth. She was so insignificant. That's the first action in her childhood. The second action, Ada thought she was 8 at the time when her mother and all the other society women were busying themselves to welcome the very first lawyer of their town, Ibusa. Whenever Ada was told that Ibusa was her town, she found it difficult to understand. Her parents, she was told, came from Ibusa, and so did many of her aunts and uncles. 3. The Ibusa women who lived in Lagos were preparing for the arrival of their town's first lawyer from the United Kingdom. The title United Kingdom, when pronounced by Ada's father, sounded so heavy, like the type of noise one associated with bombs. It was so deep, so mysterious, that Ada's father always voiced it in hushed tones. wearing such a respectful expression as if he were speaking of God's holiest of holies. The women composed songs, weaving the name of the new lawyer into them, that is, into their songs. These women were so proud of this new lawyer because to them it meant the arrival of their very own Messiah. 4. Ada was so happy with this new quote-unquote lawyer dress that she begged her mother to let her go with the women to the Apapa Wharf on a great day. That is where the lawyer was to. They were to meet the new lawyer coming from the United Kingdom, the Apapa Wharf. It pained her so much when she realized that she was not going to be allowed to go because it fell on a school day. 5. School. The Igbos never played with that. They never played with school business. They were realizing fast that one's savior from poverty and disease was education. Every Igbo family saw to it that their children attended school. Boys were usually given preference though. So even though Ada was about 8, there were still discussions about whether it would be wise to send her to school. Even if she went to school, it was very doubtful whether it would be wise to let her stay long. Quotation opens. A year or 2, as long as she can write her name and count. Then she will learn how to sew. Quotation closes. Ada had heard her mother say this many times to her friends. Soon, Ada's younger brother, Boy, started school. That is, Ada's younger brother's name is Boy, B-O-Y. 6. Ada went to school. She ran as fast as she could before anyone could stop her. She did not see any of Ma's friends because it was past midday and very hot. Most people were too tired to walk the streets at this time. She got tired running and started to trot like a lame horse. To trot is like a light jumping kind of walk that a tired horse can make when it is tired running. Tired of trotting, she walked. She was soon at the schoolroom. And the last part of the action, that is at 7, that we'll be talking about in the class today, says, Ada was sure Mr. Cole would give her that reassuring smile now in front of all these giggling idiots. Remember in the first summary of this lesson on second-class citizen, Ada left her mother at home and ran to school and burst into the classroom, and all the students, the children, were surprised to see her and they started to laugh. So, Ada was sure Mr. Cole would give her that reassuring smile now that she has burst into the classroom in front of all these giggling idiots. Mr. Cole spun round with such alacrity. Alacrity means cheerfulness. He spun round with such alacrity or cheerfulness that Ada took a step backwards. She was not frightened of Mr. Cole. It was just that the movement was so quick and so unexpected of Mr. Cole with his great bulk, that is, his great size. He was huge. Only God above knew what he expected to find behind him. Maybe a big gorilla or a wandering masquerade, maybe. But all he saw was Ada staring at him. God bless Mr. Cole. He did not laugh. He took in the situation immediately, gave Ada one of those special smiles, held out his hand, and led her to a boy who had crocro on his head and gestured to her to sit down. Yes, class, we will stop here today on the actions in the novel, and we will continue with that, with the actions, the remaining actions in the story, and then we will talk about their significance in our next lesson. I hope you enjoyed the lesson, class, And I hope you also took notes, or better still, I hope you recorded the lesson so that whatever questions or comments you may have, you can text them to 0778 780306, and we will address your comments and questions in subsequent lessons. Thank you so much for paying keen attention to the lesson today, 11th graders, and we will talk again in our next class.